Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first podcast of very many to come in the future. My name is Parth, and a little bit about myself. I am currently a junior, a third year at Ohio State University, studying economics through the Fisher College of Business. And today I am joined by a colleague of mine, a longtime friend of mine, Jan Thankapan, who is also a junior at Ohio State University and is studying neuroscience. So today we're just going to go ahead and talk about a few things I did differently this semester, thanks to an interesting class that I took. And we're going to get Mr. Thinkapan's interesting neuroscientific perspective on these things. And with that being said, Mr. J, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, is your mic okay there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you perfectly. So, can you give us a little background about yourself and why you got into the space of neuroscience, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm doing neuroscience. My specialization is actually cognitive, so we focus on some of those more algorithmic things, more math-oriented, to analyze the brain. My interests lay in like addiction and some of those, dopamine-related pathologies, and that's kind of what I like do some research on these days. And yeah, I mean, outside of neuroscience, I'm also an athlete. I love to, powerlift and play tennis. But yeah, that's pretty much, about me.
Very nice, very nice. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this course. In the beginning of this course, this is an online course, and basically it has to do with learning and motivation and things of that nature. And in the beginning of this course, we're supposed to choose a book to read for this semester, and I chose a book called A Mind for Numbers by Barbara Oakley. And it was basically going to teach me how I could get better at math, and teach me strategies of how I can get better at math, which is what I read on the cover, which is what my initial takeaway was. Um, and it was a very interesting book. But before I get into some specifics about the book and some concepts that were interesting from the book, I just want to go over a few of my goals and show you exactly how exactly a few things that I learned through this class and that I did differently. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the first topic, and that's study. When you're studying and you're taking notes, or you're setting goals for yourself, or whatever the case may be, um, there's a right way to do it, which is the efficient way, which is the way where you're taking these notes or reading a book and you're not wasting your time, and you're actually soaking in more information. And there's the half-ass way to do it, which is just going through and acting like you're learning everything, under that fake, it's a lie. You're lying to yourself, but you're just trying to get your stuff done, and whatever you consider, the quickest way to get it done is, the best way for you, which was like me in high school and many, many years in college as well. And that seemed to, let me get by. And I didn't have to do anything else. But now I'm taking a bunch of hard classes, and that does not cut it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I want to talk about is taking notes, and I'm going to go over a strategy that I used, and then I'm also going to go over um, how I annotated and went over my readings, and then in the end, I'm going to go over some goals that I set for myself to get all my studying done for this midterm, and yeah, I'll just go ahead and get started with that. And then after I'm done with my spiel, I'm gonna have Jay give his medical or professional opinion on these strategies and how actually it impacts your brain, and how actually it is more efficient and is better for you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. So this is Exhibit A. Screen you see right now is for my accounting class, and basically, you can see this, right, Jay?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. So initially, when I would take notes, I would just write everything down, bullet by bullet. And what I learned in the book is that there's different, note taking strategies, and one of them is chunking your information up into little blocks, and also, color coding these things so that you know exactly what is on the page and what is important and things that you want to group together, and that way you can stay organized. So what I did here was I went through each module. Each module meaning each module has a little bit different or more advanced as you go into the modules 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, et cetera. You get into more advanced material and different material. And what I did was I just started jotting things down, the important things down, and afterwards, in order to remember the stuff even better, I went back and asked myself, what actually did I learn? If I were to sum up what I learned into a question, what would that question be? And when I come back to study later on, I can just look at these questions and then see exactly what answer or what information is in that box and what is going to get answered. So there's that. And then now I'm going to show you I'm going to show you how I annotated, did some notes. So here, I went with my highlighter, and before I would just highlight random things or just highlight sentences, but at the end of the page, in my whole page, like there'd be many sentences that have yellow over them, and it was very hard for me to go back and see what was actually important. So now I write in the margins, and I write the big idea, and if I want something to take away, some big takeaway, then I will make sure I circled it in a special way and wrote in big letters, or wrote the key takeaway of this whole entire section. So in this case, going over some finance stuff, and yeah, that's what I did there. And then finally, I'm going to share with you how I took notes, and or not notes, how I set goals for myself. And oh, wrong screenshot. Oops. Let me go ahead and open that up. But in the meantime, Jay, can you talk about how the mind works with these different methods and your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. And simply put, there's just two basic type of memories. There's short-term memory and there's long-term memory. And then, there's other types, but those are the two main associated with learning. And they're typically housed in the hippocampus, which is the learning center of the brain. And a lot of those methods you mentioned, like chunking and highlighting and, mnemonics, what those do is they help you rehearse and keep it in your short-term memory long enough for it to be solidified and transferred into long-term. And then, that's what we want, is to convert it over to long-term. That's where the true learning happens. And when you have multiple associations, like for example, color coding, your brain associates a certain concept or word or definition or something like that with a color or a rhyme or rhythm, something like that, that allows for you to, rehearse it, keep it long enough in your short term. And it's said that there's usually about 7 items maximum, we'll give plus or minus 2, that you can hold in your short term. And as long as you keep that, rehearsal going on, you can, throw it back into the hippocampus. And that's the main part there with learning. And, taking notes, engaging with the material, really interacting with whatever is put in front of you, whether it's in class or, coming back multiple times to really consolidate the information. That's the key there.
Okay. So I guess if people haven't tried these strategies, or didn't or don't do anything different, or study the same way that they have in like high school, or however old they were, how would you recommend them to change their study habits, or how do you study? Actually, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you approach this.
Yeah, so my initial advice would be not to just go to class and sit there and then go home and cram. That's typically what you see in college students, and I've had a phase like that myself earlier on. But what you need to realize is you're not going to learn unless you engage with the material. You look at it multiple times. You really commit it, to heart. Like you're gonna have to go through those chunking strat. I personally use like I'll do some rhymes or I'll do like some really odd associations. For example, if I'm trying to remember a part of the brain, like, oh, the cerebral cortex is where higher function happens, I'll be like, cerebral is, some rhyming word like cereal, just like some random stuff that, it's odd. It doesn't really make sense, but because it stands out and it's an association to something you've known, from before, it'll add like component of uniqueness that you'll be able to retain better. So that's typically what I do is just writing down my notes, engaging with it, and then rehearsing it.
Okay, nice. So I guess something that I've had a hard time with, I always say I want to do that or I want to do this, but I never get around to it. And I find myself cramming in the very end. So what I did for this, what I did was I made a plan. So I learned that making a plan like 5 days out before your exam will, I would just want to try out because I haven't done it in a long time. And I've always been lying to myself, I'll study here, I'll study there, but it always ends up being a lot of studying the 2 days before the exam. So what I did here was I started actually 7 days before my exam, and I started, basically my exam was this week, and it went actually very, very, very well. I am very confident in my score that I got, but the first day was prepping, and I laid out all my study tasks I need to cover and printed out all the necessary papers and decide on which sections I could see myself struggling with and that I struggled in class. And then the next day I started doing practice problems and did my best on the practice problems and didn't review my notes. Or I did review my notes before, but I did not look at the answers for the practice. And then the next day I reviewed my answers and saw where I went wrong, and then studied the notes and reviewed my teacher's, online lectures and that kind of stuff. And if I missed a question, I actually wrote out, why it went wrong and what I needed to do different. Then I started studying more of the material, and I went onto YouTube to see if there was maybe some different opinion or different take on this method that I could learn from. And then I reviewed what I did the previous day on VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions, which have to do with Excel. And then the last day I prepared for which I thought was the easiest part of the exam, and then I reviewed that. And then on the very, very last day, I took a practice midterm exam and did pretty well on that, and reviewed everything I needed to, and laid out which areas I still struggled with. And then the next 2 days, I focused on those areas. So setting goals for yourself is something that I did not do before this class. And coming into this class, we have to talk about what goals we wanted to set for ourselves. And something that I really wanted to do is exactly that, set goals for myself, achievable goals, small goals in which I can actually see the progress being made. And before, what I would do is I would just have very broad goals and really impossible to measure. It's all just a mind game, it's just my overconfidence or my ego would just say, yeah, I'm closer to achieving my goals. And it would be a lot of up and down, emotional roller coaster with whatever good comes in my life, and then bad, and then good and bad. And then, managing my time, my finances, everything was something that I didn't really have a grip on because I didn't really have a grip on my goals. So coming into this, I wanted to have my goals set, and I wanted to create plans for my classes, and I wanted to create plans for my studying and balancing everything else out of my life. So those are some goals that I set, and this is one clear example of how I set those goals, and this is in the form of the 5-day study plan. And an obstacle that I did have was on I believe it was the 3rd day and the 4th day, something came up with my car, and my engine just wouldn't start. It would just spaz out, just vibrate crazily. I had no idea what the issue was. Got it sent to the shop, and it really threw off my vibe and my chi for the rest of the week. But I had my schedule created, and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't put my 2 hours in. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I was at. I was dedicated, and it's really nice that that happened. Do you set goals for yourself, and like do you put that into your study regimen or any regimen? And what can you say about setting goals for yourself? And now I guess we'll talk about reward systems and see how you can hack your brain or trick your brain into getting these things done and like having some sort of biological motivation or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm. So yeah, I wanted to start out with saying on like a more like behavioral level, you want to set what is called SMART goals, and that actually is an acronym which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So you want quantitative goals that have time restrictions, they have boundaries that you can assess and come back to, and like almost like a checklist to see track your progress as you're going along, really outlining it, whether it's writing it down in a planner or in your phone, in your notes app or whatever, and just getting that really down. And then I'm glad you mentioned reward systems, because that's essentially what dictates our behavior overall when it comes to literally anything. And the main neurotransmitter associated with reward is actually dopamine. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that. And so there's three main pathways: nigrostriatal and mesolimbic and mesocortical. And so the two pathways we really want to focus on in terms of a biological standard is mesolimbic and mesocortical. And so just to put it simply, there's two types of goal setting that happens that completely modulated by reward systems, and that is going to be short-term goals, or what people would say immediate gratification, and then also long-term goals. And immediate gratification is a huge thing that I like to look at in my personal research, and I actually do see it everywhere, especially in the United States, where we have technology and resources, and we're privileged with a lot of the things that we have. And this can be a double-edged sword, because it kind of biohacks our dopamine systems, and we start firing only it's called the nuclear accumbens. And that's, so there's bottom up and there's top down. Bottom up is when you're essentially you're actually reacting to like simple pleasures. So that's where addiction is born. This is where like, for example, it can be as simple as you procrastinating an assignment, or you waking up late every day. You are stuck in sort of a loop almost, that's a learned behavioral bottom up immediate gratification that's dictated by that kind of dopamine, which is from the VTA, or the ventral tegmental area, into the nucleus accumbens and other surrounding areas in the brain. But what we want to achieve is long-term goal setting and long-term pleasure, which is top down. So we're actually using higher structures of the brain. In this situation, would be the prefrontal cortex, which is in the frontal lobe, normally associated with higher function. But the prefrontal cortex in particular, if you're cognizant of it, and that's the main thing here, whether it comes to studying, where you write it down or you engage with the material, that's a very cognitive process. Like, you're taking ideas, you're putting them in your head, you're thinking about what you're doing. And when you think about what you're doing, when you're aware of your behaviors, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, for why, what reason, is there a bigger purpose, or am I just eating this sugar or alcohol or whatever material interaction it might be that hijacks the short term. So you want to be cognizant, keep it long term, and that way your brain starts to lean toward the top down pathway, which is going to be long term setting, goal setting, and achieving that. And so that's sort of the shebang on that.
So like you spoke on these loops. So I mean, nowadays it's easier than ever to get distracted. And like, I guess like to our viewers out there, our future viewers, how can people be, how can people be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of their brain? And I mean, you said it is long term, the goals that you're trying to set, or you have to have patience in this kind of stuff. But like, to see the long term, people are living paycheck to paycheck, or you have this and you have that, and it's like, you know what, I
Mm-hmm.
just want to break every night. I'm gonna sip some beers, or do whatever I gotta do, do what I do whatever I
Yeah,
gotta
yeah,
do some meth. I mean, people be doing some crazy shit nowadays. So
yeah.
I guess from this book, is there's this quote. It says, and I quote: "Reshaping your brain is under your control. The key is patient persistence."
Mm-hmm.
working knowledgeably with your brain's strengths and weaknesses. So, and this is an excerpt from Barbara Oakley's A Mind for Numbers, the book that I read. But can you talk about just your opinion and your advice on, noticing your weaknesses and strengths and how to actually to work on them? And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think in this like day of social media and technology and all this, it's very easy to get kind of lost in these loops, because we don't realize certain behaviors as loops or addictive or whatever label you want to put on it, that that is predicated on short-term pleasure. So for example, some people who they only eat like junk food, they don't realize that sugar is like what they're to put it unfortunately is a slave to, and that applies to as extreme as like you said earlier, meth or any extreme drug of choice, or alcohol, or any material possession. People are addicted to food. People are addicted to people or sex, or and all these things that we have available to us in this world. It can be something that your brain can just especially in the first world. So I'd say an approach to kind of combat that is to really every time you do something, never let yourself go on autopilot. And I know that's hard, easier said than done, but what happens is you'll kind of get into a routine, and if you're familiar with the circadian rhythm, you know how your body has a sleep rhythm. The same way, there's different circuitries that make up who you are, and those circuitries get strengthened every time you utilize them. So you'll just have these addictive kind of dopamine predicated circuitries that are strengthened every time you reinforce it and go back to it. So in everyday day-to-day life, pay attention to what you're doing. Are you drinking water and eating healthy and working out for you, or are you dealing with stress in a negative way, like drinking it away, or having sex with like random people, or whatever it is that you do? You just have to be cognizant of what you're doing and making sure that you're there, like you are there, not just your autopilot, like dopamine, and sorry to put it this way, but enslaved sort of to your dopamine. And because that's essentially what it is. You're kind of in a cage if you don't get out. And the key is about thinking about everything you do, and that's why people recommend meditation and exercise and mindfulness. And that's something that I've been trying to work on myself, is meditating more. And this what is meditation? It simply allows you to be aware, and that's what you want, to be able to catch yourself, whether you're being negative or positive. So um
so do you meditate when you're showering, or when you're like in class, or all day, or like what is this meditation, quote unquote, you speak of? How do you
um
meditate?
So I think it's kind of a difficult thing to address, but to put it simply, meditation is just emptying your mind out of all thoughts, because thoughts are what strengthen circuitries, and circuitries are what kind of put you in a behavioral loop. And so when you meditate, you're essentially halting any use of your mental space for thought, and because that's the fuel for behavior. So if you can halt all thought, then you can halt behavior, and you focus on breathing, and you focus on just being. So you kind of reach a state, and like I said, this is harder done, and there's great apps out there like Headspace that can guide you through it, but that's how I do it on my own. But guided meditation is also a great start. And so the whole goal is to get to that state where you can be aware and see who you are for what you are, and everything that you do will become that much more novel. And that's what you want, is to be in a state where you're able to observe yourself in the highest state of mind. And things like exercise and good deeds and being positive, all of those things kind of culminate to longer term, higher consciousness type awareness.
Interesting. So I guess, do you have any other thoughts, or any ideas about or anything new that you have seen or studied or researched about reward systems, or I guess, just, is there a plan that someone can make to be aware of these things? Like, let's just say you're doing these things on autopilot, but how do you recognize that you're doing these things on autopilot? And like, most people, I mean, a lot of people, I don't want to say most people, just don't recognize their full potential, or just, recognize that
Mm-hmm.
they can be whatever they want to be. And like,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen overnight, obviously, but if you approach yourself with the fact that you will be the best version of yourself with whatever you have in that very moment. And if you do that, if you simply accept that, and if you simply live that, then in the next 1 year or in the next 10 years, if you keep on living that, the best version of yourself is you're going to keep on getting better and better, whether it be physically, mentally, or whatever, so
Mhm.
it's not about, I mean, what I would have to say is, the iPhone came out in 2008, I believe, and or 2007, 2008, and you see the iPhone after 1 year, some people have it, it's like, wow, iPhones are cool, this and that, and then technology is developing, and 10 years later you see the iPhones that we have now. Everyone has an iPhone. You go
Mhm.
to the subway and everyone's looking down at their iPhones, or whatever phones they have. And I guess that's the power of that technology. And I guess that's just the phone, but people underestimate their brain. The brain is also a piece of technology. And and I guess if you're just aware that it's a dopamine that really controls. I mean, shit. How much does a dopamine actually control? Like, I mean, it's a scary thought to think about, but the
It controls everything because, all neurotransmitters that we have, they're all, I mean, anything that is in our biology is an evolutionary mechanism that's like given us everything that we have today. Like, dopamine is why we eat food. Like, otherwise we wouldn't eat food. We need to be rewarded for good behaviors and punished for bad ones. That's why we have sex, because it's rewarded. That's how you procreate and create more children. It's all, the major drives of humanity are all predicated on neurotransmitters. Like, and serotonin, for example, is going to be more like, not necessarily just happiness, but gregariousness, social situations being uplifting. And then you have, like, your inhibitory GABA and all that. They're all evolutionary mechanisms that, or they're just like ways in which our neurons communicate. And like you were saying, like, the brain's a technology as well. And to really think about it, the brain has 85 billion neurons and 85 billion glia cells, you know, summing up to, a trillion synaptic connections. That is one powerful computer, probably the most complex, powerful computer that we know of. And considering how many dimensions the neurons may project up to, could be a quantum, or even something, something that is linguistically outside of our grasps. And that's what we're trying to figure out today is, with current research. And it's definitely a very, very fascinating thing.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much for your medical, or I'm sorry, your scientific knowledge with in regards to all of this stuff. I guess just going forward, what I'm going to be doing different, what I've been preaching. I mean, I was talking to my brother the other day, and it's just about setting small goals, so that you can see exactly how you're achieving them and how you're working towards that. And once you achieve one goal, you set another goal, and you set another goal, you set another goal, keep on going until, I mean, there honestly, like, the goals will never end. You always be working to do something, because you're never at full potential. I mean, as much as you want to accept that, I mean, you're never at full potential. Even the best of the best in this world aren't at full potential. There's always something you can work on, and setting these goals and organizing your thoughts and organizing your studies and organizing whatever you can, and in a way where it makes it easier for you to understand and dig into and recollect and remember. Let's just say, like, if you're studying, it's going to be easier for you to remember and this kind of stuff. But if you're setting these goals and it resonates with you and you remember it more often, it's just most people, they set these goals, and it's like, I'm going to work out, and it's, New Year's rolls around. It's like, my New Year's resolutions, I'm going to go to the gym. And then they go to the gym for like 1 week, and then they're like, you know what, they just forget. It's like, you got to constantly keep it in the top of your head, and you have to make it, you have to do it the first time in that 1 week that you do go. You have to make it memorable, and you have to make it so memorable that you keep on remembering to do it. And same with your studies, and same with, any aspect. Same with working out. Um, literally anything. Work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, nothing worthwhile comes easily, and that's why we get fooled into the short-term loops, because we just want things, or we, want to work with things that make us feel good now in this moment. And we have to realize that, if we want to ever go to that full potential, like you mentioned, you have to really apply yourself and really see your weaknesses, see your strengths. How can you grow yourself and really push for that maximum utilization of your being? And that's kind of the thing there. So yeah, definitely agree with you there.
Awesome. Yeah. I guess just a little personal anecdote before we end, with some finishing remarks. I guess I went to Israel this December, and I had a really great trip, and it was one of the best 2 weeks of my life. And then I come back, and then it's like, I kind of stopped working out, and after this really big high up moment, that I had in my life, and then I come back, and it's not the same as it was before. And I kind of lost my wave in terms of not going to the gym and this kind of all that kind of stuff. But then I recently got back on it this last month, and I was just like, what was I doing that month? I kind of lost myself, let myself slip up. But now it's like, it's about coming back, and don't be discouraged if you give up once. Just keep on coming back and make it something that you're not just working out for the summer. You're not just working out so you can get a six pack. That goal is too short. You're working out and you're doing this stuff. So you're always doing it. So, you got to set intermediate goals, but that's not just the ultimate goal. You have to think about the bigger picture. And I guess that's the small goal. You can't think of it as a big goal. The big goal, I guess, not even that, it's not even that big, but think 10 years out. That's the big goal. And that's as far as you should think out, because even 5 years out, honestly, a lot can be accomplished in 5-10 years. But people don't have a grasp of what can be accomplished. And if you have, monthly goals, then you could break it down easier and get to your goals easier. So that's what I have about that. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, not really. I think we covered it really well. I enjoyed this conversation with you, and just I guess all I can leave everyone with is just be the best version of yourself. Sometimes it means working hard, and it won't always be the easiest or most pleasurable thing, but if you can set those little goals, achieve them, and build your way up, through attainable, milestones, and I think that's the best way to approach life. And yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much for being here. Going forward, we're gonna have more guests on the podcast. We're gonna get more professional. We're gonna get everything set, and in terms of getting some actual cameras and trying to find a place to meet in person and get some cameras set up and all that stuff. But that is a commitment. I do have to set these goals for myself, these financial goals, to get the equipment and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see where we're at in about 3 months. That's the time I'm given to get everything set up. But we're gonna talk about more more things like this, self improvement, how to do more self improvement, how to make your habits go away, and we'll talk about everything we possibly can, and bring some interesting guests in from the local area, and we'll pick their brains and get to learn about what they have to say and their thoughts. And thank you very much again for coming out and participating in the Individed Podcast numero uno, number one for all my English speakers out there. Bless up. Keep it real.
Bless up.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone. One love.
Stay positive, fam.